Okay, we got a good one for you today. This is the remarkable case of Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a scientist in the mid-1700s who got to go and see hell. He traveled into hell and recorded everything he saw about it.
It's an amazing story, and there were three things in particular that he found that shaped the nature of that hell, that kind of constituted hell.
And we're going to go in this show and read an in-depth interview with a demon who claims to rule not just hell, but the entire universe. Welcome to the Swedenborg in Life podcast, everybody. I'm Curtis, your host or your co-host, Jonathan, Dr. Jonathan Rose, the other co-host.
Nice to be with you, Curtis.
We're going to go into hell today. We're going to take a trip down in to learn about the nature of what makes hell what it is. And we're talking about like a place in the afterlife. And we're even going to get the perspective of somebody that lives in there and what they think of it.
When I was editing for the New Century Edition, which I still am, but the first volume that we ever did was Heaven and Hell. Yeah. And I have to admit, I was a little nervous as I approached, because it has a long section, about 70% of the work is about heaven, and then he's got about 20% about the so-called world of spirits between the two. Yeah. And then just the last 10% is hell. But I was kind of nervous, but actually there was beautiful stuff in there. What he had to say about hell was really interesting, actually.
If any of you out there don't know Swedenborg's take on hell, buckle up. There's some shocking stuff in there in all ways. I mean, the people who think there's no hell, it's all love and light on the other side, there's actually, you see the depths of depravity in the afterlife. But the people who think hell is the place where God punishes you for what you did here,
torture, and
that's not it as well. But it's actually something that's more fascinating and psychologically relevant, I think, than either of those. But you might say, why are you guys even going and talking about hell? What's the motivation for it? Well, this is why Swedenborg went and learned about hell. He actually tells the story of it in his book, True Christianity, where he's describing a spiritual experience that he had. He says, on one occasion, I was meditating on heaven and hell. I felt a growing desire to have a universal concept of the state of each one, because I know that someone with a universal understanding can make sense of details, because the details are part of that overall picture.
I love that what a question to be meditating on. And I also have the sense that, given other things that he says, that actually part of his meditation was that this desire flowed into him.
Yeah.
And what a thing to look for. And that does kind of characterize his writing about the afterlife. Near-death experiences, which I absolutely love and are fascinating, have a lot of micro details, and I saw this and I did that, and he is kind of sweeping. And it's interesting that he prayed for that, like he specifically wanted that.
You got it.
The overarching understanding.
Well, because he's like, how can we make sense of this? You need to be able to make sense of it. You can't get around the hell thing, because obviously it's in a lot of the major religious traditions. There's this. Yep. Everyone's talking about there's some kind of negative state you can get into the afterlife.
Certainly in the Bible.
Certainly in the Bible. But even if you just say, well, that was all the past and now you have these near-death experiences, there's hell in near-death experiences. Yeah. We talked last time about Howard Storm, and there's all this negativity.
It started out in a dark place.
Biting and killing. But even I spoke at the IANS conference a few times, International Association for Near-Death Studies, and they have whole panels and segments on distressing NDEs. Mm-hmm. That a lot of it is light and love, and certainly you encounter God a lot of people have a picture of God as angry and distant and judgmental, and you don't find that at all, but you're still finding hell. So what's going on with that?
Why, isn't that interesting?
Why is there the dark side in the afterlife? And what makes something...
Yeah, because you would think the hell part would go with the kind of angry God part, and if you got rid of that, then you don't have hell anymore.
Right.
But you do.
Where's it coming from? That's what these three things tell you. They define what it is. It's an arbitrary decision of God. Over here's hell, over here's heaven, and I'm going to make this into hell because I put instruments of torment in there.
Because I just don't like those people. Let's face it.
So, Here's what it is. Here's how he starts to discover it. With this desire in my heart, I turned my attention toward the area on the eastern side of the northern region where those places of instruction are.
Oh, okay.
So to anyone,
interesting. That's where he focuses, because he talks about the fact that when you're going through these stages after death, there's a third stage. The first stage is you're just sort of living your life just like you did.
You mean after death?
After death, that's right. And then the second stage is you start to go inward and see what's really making you tick. And then once you get boiled down to your sort of essence, then there's a level of education. So, and that happens in particular places in the north, because the north is a place that corresponds to not knowing as much as you wish you knew. You know, it's not sort of bathed in light like the south. And so very interesting that that's where his attention went.
And to you and I and people who've been watching this channel for a while, you're like, oh yeah, he's talking about the north. If this is your first time, where did we go? Sorry, context, place. Swedenborg is talking about, he's meditating and can start to see through the eyes of his spirit. So when he talks about those places and locations, that's in the afterlife. He's seeing through into that world where the direction things are in, the location they're in, has a lot of meaning for the kind of
north and south and all those things. Yeah,
of what's going on there.
It's fascinating that world, just as much as this one, has orientation to these kind of points of the compass or whatever you call them.
Yeah. A way there then opened up to me, and I went along it. I came into one college where there were young adults. I went up to the senior faculty. They got senior faculty in heaven.
Look at that.
Tenure track faculty.
That's great.
Whether that's
they're
like
taking care of the good,
heaven is
the
better
teachers.
because of that, or oh no, I can never escape going to school. I went up to the senior faculty who taught there. Well, because the things we have on earth are downstream from the things
that's right
that are in heaven.
That's right.
And asked them whether they know what the universal characteristics of heaven are and what the universal characteristics of hell are. They replied that they know very...
This is like one of those quiz shows where you have to answer most of the questions, but you also have a call. You can call somebody who might be able to help. You know, he's sort of calling, like, okay, this is a big question. I need to go to those educators.
So this is in heaven. You're going to a place of learning in heaven, talking to the senior faculty there, asking what seems like a pretty basic question. What makes heaven heaven? Listen to what they say. They replied that they know very little about it.
Now, that's why they're teaching in heaven humility. Like, that's good.
But added, if we look toward the Lord in the east, we will be enlightened and will know the answer.
So they know how to get the information. Yeah.
So not
it's
at all.
It's like going in the back room and looking it up kind of thing. It's like,
no hubris.
We can find this out.
No calcification around their opinions. No, don't you know who I am? I'm senior faculty at Heaven University.
No.
Something, state university.
I don't have time for this question.
Can't you see I'm teaching? So let's look to the east and see what God says about this. Surprising a headline from this is that there's love in hell, but it's not the kind of love that you would think. These are the three distortions that they lay out here. That heaven is things as they should be, and hell is the twisting of those things into their opposites.
Kind of the inversion.
It's the origin story, the actual origin story of hell.
They're the same things. They're just the other way. The priorities are completely inverted.
It's like cold is the absence of heat, dark is the absence of light. This is from True Christianity 661. They did so and said, so they turned, got some enlightenment, and this is what came out of their mouths. There are three universal characteristics of hell. We're starting with hell. They are the complete opposites of the universal characteristics of heaven. The universal characteristics of hell are the following three loves.
Three loves. Okay, three loves. All right.
So let's see what they are. A love for power that comes from loving ourselves.
So there's sort of two loves in there in a way, but that's one of the three.
It's where that love is sourced from.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Right. And so it's a love of power, but it comes from a completely self-centered perspective.
Second, a love for possessing other people's wealth that comes from loving the world.
Okay, so you've got loving the world, but this has an intrinsic thing of like, what a strange, what I really want most. And don't they say, isn't it like a stolen coin is more precious than any that you acquired by honest means, or something like that? Like, what I really love, what I want is what you've got. What I've got, that's not interesting to me, but I want to take something from you.
And the third one, promiscuous love.
That's a big one.
Promiscuous.
Very popular.
Sexual immorality.
Yeah.
That's the third.
Right.
That's the third
Sexual
universal
acting out.
characteristic.
Isn't that interesting?
So let's talk about those for a second.
Universal. Yeah.
Before we get to the three for
universal,
heaven.
to me, what a universal characteristic would mean was that even though there are many different areas in hell and 3 different levels of it, and there's all these different points of the compass and so on, the thing that you find everywhere in all those communities are these 3 things.
So a love for power that comes from loving ourselves. What Swedenborg means by that is the concept of self is like, I want power. That's how you would say that. Is I want power just because I want it.
Just because I want it.
Not because I can say, I need power. Like I need to be in charge. I know how this dam works. If you're doing it wrong, if you don't do it right, this whole town's going to get flooded. Sure. Get out of the way. I need to do it.
That's not what we're talking about. Right.
But the love of power. So that's what makes hell. And then a love of wealth from a love of the world, which elsewhere he defines as this is purely for the gratification you feel in having wealth, or the frivolous kind of superficial gratifications you can get from materialists. So it's selfishness, materialism, and licentiousness.
Yes, and they're all antisocial. I mean, I can see why they're against heaven. Each of those things. Because the idea of dominating, which to me is the kind of word that comes to mind, like crushing your enemies. I've been listening to a audio book about the history of ancient Rome, and it's amazing how it's almost like the ring of power. Everybody wants to get. Oh wait, no, it's mine. Oh, and what they do with their rule of the world. It's not pretty most of the time. And so I can see that's antisocial. It's also antisocial to say, oh, we're not going to have like everybody's going to have good things or something like that. No. I'm going to get all the good stuff. I'm perfectly happy if you don't have anything.
Yeah.
That would be great with me, because it would feed the thing that I
Or it's
like,
I will steal what you need to live and feed your family. I'll steal it just to pad my...
I've got plenty.
Just to experience it. Like I don't care what this does to you. I just want it. So
it's almost, I wonder at some levels where it's the actual delight of the look on the other person's face when they realize you just pulled all this stuff out of their bank account and then they've got a zero. And
so all those things, I think you see them most clearly. This is a big claim that's what makes hell. I think you can see it more clearly as when other people have it than when you have it. Because if Swedenborg says, we naturally have a tendency to like the stuff that makes up hell. We like that. I like to be powerful. I like to get my way.
Yeah.
And I like to...
Money's great.
Rule over people.
Always have more.
Well, it's like you have 2 cookies and I have 1. I like having 2 cookies. That's great. And I like eat. But when other people have it, when somebody else is dominating you, you hate it. When somebody else is ruling, when you have to do what they want instead of what you want, you hate it. When somebody else has what you wish you had and you can't get it or you don't have enough, you hate that.
How many movies have that scene where somebody's forcing somebody else to do something and they realize that the other person just has the upper hand? whether through threat of violence or whatever, they've got them wedged in through or threat of hurting somebody else that they love, whatever it is, that they just, I have to do this against my own will. And you can sense the resentment and the, oh, I hate you. And if I had the upper hand, I would totally do the same to you, like it breeds bad feeling. And the promiscuity part is also interesting because, like, it's very destructive of society for people to just be, like sexual mayhem and cheating and everybody, it breaks down the fundamental pillars of society.
Well, let's look. I feel like we can understand all three of them, but that one in particular better if we see what's the universal characteristics of heaven.
Okay, good.
So
I'm interested that the wise people started with the hell answer, because he asked about both, didn't he?
Yeah. And even though
they filed the hell report first.
And hell is the derivative one. Hell is
it's the opposite.
It's just the corruption.
It's the inversion.
Okay.
But often Swedenborg says that it helps you to understand what goodness is. If you really get how evil works, you can see what goodness is, the opposite of that.
The universal characteristics of heaven are the following three loves, which are the opposites of the loves just mentioned. A love for power that comes from loving to be useful.
A love. So same first half.
Yeah.
Love of power, but the whole reasoning is entirely different because, if I had more authority here, I could fix that for these people. I could make life better for these people. I could make the system work better.
A love for possessing worldly wealth that comes from loving to do useful things with it.
Whoa, now, yeah.
And true marriage love.
True marriage love.
You thought what he was going to say? I'm not saying you thought, but just in general.
Oh yeah. I think you're right.
If hell is the love of power from the ruling and the love of material wealth and the love of promiscuity, what you think he's going to say is heaven is where you don't want to be powerful at all.
It's a love of serving.
You have no possessions and you are abstinent.
Yes. Right.
You'd think that's what, but it's not.
You would think that's where he's going. And those are very time-honored theories about what's heavenly.
But actually, what it is, the greatest thing in heaven is a love of power for the sake of usefulness. So whatever you're trying, everyone in heaven is doing something that's useful for people.
Yeah.
That's
and
what
loving being able to help. Because it is a terrible feeling when you see a mess going on or you see somebody who's hurting and you cannot do anything,
Yeah.
And so, yes, you would love to have the power to address that situation and make it better. And then the same thing with the wealth, having the wealth to be able to make a difference.
If I'm a carpenter and I don't really know how to cut a board, I can't really build this thing for this person, but I want the power of being able to do that. If I had a second truck and some guys, we could really. Yeah. Same thing with worldly wealth. If my use is I'm taking care of children, my kids, I need enough money to give them what they need. You need that stuff. That's good. That's what heaven is. Heaven is not, I don't care about, we'll just go without because we're in heaven.
Yeah, how useful if you just talk about another truck and some other guy. What if you were like a mammoth organized, what if you had like thousands of trucks? So you could solve so many things for so many people at the same time.
And then true marriage love, which Swedenborg talked about at length. He wrote a whole book on it that says that like a fundamental unit of happiness in heaven is that you can have a married couple, like he actually calls them one angel. So
that's right.
So that's one of the bedrocks of what heaven is. So the promiscuity destroys that, and so that's everybody can be super into it. But that if you're into that promiscuity, you're in. That's what makes hell.
And a lot of people, I think, sort of instinctively think. I think all of us, our own lower nature, thinks that those are the same thing. Like. Sex is sex, it's all the same thing. And so what's the difference between marriage or if you love somebody or whatever? But Swedenborg said, there's a huge difference between whether it's destroying this thing this institution that's good for society.
Yeah.
Is it destroying that, or does it serve that?
Well, because he says that you can get married and stay married forever. You know, like
he says it's a building block of heaven, right? Like it's
so
you know.
What the point of it is, the whole reason why people get, according to Swedenborg, the whole reason why people get Twitter-pated in the first place. That's a Bambi reference. Does everyone know that? Twitter-pated is like the word they use for like when it's spring and all the animals start like, whoa, noticing each other. Go watch Bambi. The reason why there's that drive in the first place, like it comes out as reproduction here, and that's the way the human race continues. But there is a fundamental, human beings were made to join like that. And it goes, from that comes all the heavenly happiness. From that comes all the joy of heaven. Everything good is tied into that. And that's like what we're designed for. Like it's supposed to be that you kind of get a crush and that pulls you in to a relationship with someone, but eventually you're playing a different game, which is like you connecting more and more deeply, and that goes forever. That's what makes you happier in heaven. If you're engaging in stuff that destroys that, or I should say, engaging in fooling around outside that relationship destroys the ability for the two of you to stay connected. And so that messes up like your whole heavenly so it's way more toxic to human beings than it seems like.
You realize.
You realize, or than it seems like.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a very interesting counterintuitive way to structure society, where you would have two people, and Swedenborg emphasizes the fact that the two people are equals and that they're both free. You know, there's an essential. It's not that one's sort of dominant over the other.
Like in his day, it was husband gets to say whatever it is.
Oh yeah.
But he said actually,
and owning property, all these kind of things. No, it's the vision that he presents is there's an equality, there's a freedom. Both people want to be there. They both love the other person. It is that kind of soulmate concept that
right.
that is just in the culture somewhere. That idea that there's that perfect person, or not a perfect person, but perfect person for you. You know, like somebody who is just the right.
You're
fit
made
with
for.
you.
You're destined for this person.
Right.
So you don't want to mess that up. You don't want to use the cool things in the world that God made in order to enrich yourself at the expense of others, or just to make them mindless gratifications. Like if you would risk harming people, ignoring important things just to go and gratify yourself in whatever food or whatever. That's not good. But the sort of the granddaddy of them all is this love of ruling from the love of self, which we're going to look at in depth here as we start to make our journey down into the hills.
That's so interesting. And it's very interesting that I think there's quite a philosophy in the world that, like, that's a great thing. I saw a video years ago that was just giving you advice on how to be successful in the world.
Yeah.
And one of the things that it said that just absolutely astonished me was that if you're sitting at a little table having lunch with somebody, you should take up as much space at that table as possible. You should push their stuff as far over on their side of the table. Take up a lot of space, dominate the conversation. You know, this was serious advice of how to get ahead, to just be large and in charge, and I was horrified because of the kind of things that Swedenborg says. It's like, I don't think that's how an angel, I don't think an angel is like taking up half of your part of the table and eating off your plate and all this kind of thing.
Yeah. Let's see what Swedenborg learns this, and let's see how it strikes him. This is, again, true Christianity. When I was home again, a voice from heaven said to me, so he's out of his spiritual trip, a voice from heaven said to me, reflect on these three universal characteristics above and the three below, and then we will see them on your hand.
What?
Come again?
Okay. I didn't see that coming.
I was already with you. Okay, you're going to take a trip into hell. Okay, you're going to give me these three things. Now what are you talking about? See it on your hand. They said on your hand.
And this is reminding me of our last episode where it talked about the highlighting right? Like telling him, reflect, because we can connect with you more if you're going to reflect on these things. So
right.
Now he's got this little key to the thing. Here's 3 of these, 3 of those. Now think about that.
They said on your hand, because everything that we reflect on with our intellect appears before the angels as if it was written on our hands.
That is so weird.
That is why the book of Revelation, you think the book of Revelation is weird? It is quite weird. This is why the book of Revelation says that people would receive a mark on their forehead or on their hand.
We just talked about that.
We did a show about the mark of the beast and all that. Check back a few episodes. But he's saying,
his reflection on that, they'll actually be able to, and he knows he said something weird, right? Because he doesn't just sort of leave it hanging there. He says, the reason, he has to explain about the hand thing, because he knows that a lot of his readers go, like, what?
He can picture some 18th century baron, okay, I'll read the ravings of a madman. I then engaged in a reflection on the first universal love in hell, the love for power that comes from loving ourselves. Then I considered the universal love in heaven that is its opposite, the love for power that comes from loving to be useful. I was not allowed to consider the one love without considering the other, because the intellect does not accurately perceive the one love in the absence of the other, since they are opposites.
So he's been giving 3 up here, let's call them A, B, C, and then X, Y, Z, and then he starts with X and compares it with A. It's interesting how he's going about this.
Unless you know the opposite, you don't understand the value of something. Unless you know what kids are like and how their little minds grow and what the kind of things they love and what they care about, you don't understand how treating them badly is such a bad thing.
Yeah, right.
Because you don't understand it. Until you go through having something done to you, I bet those people who do the credit card fraud or the people who call people up and try to defraud them, I don't think they understand what that feels like. I think in their minds, a lot of them, they've kind of justified it and compartmentalized it. Well, it's just, it doesn't really, but to understand the humiliation and the fear and the distress that comes from being ripped off.
The lasting sense of not being able to trust yourself or whatever it might be.
Unless you understand the opposite, you don't understand. There's how many people who came out of a situation where they had alcoholic parents and now they're thinking, I'm never going to touch that stuff. I'm going to crusade against it. Seeing the opposite, you don't understand why what's good is good until you've seen how it goes wrong.
And especially with things like sexuality that we were just talking about, because it all seems like the same. Isn't it all the same thing? It's like physical pleasure, and maybe there's a love connection, or maybe there isn't. But no, when you really look at it and examine it, there's 2 opposite things going on there.
Well, unless you know what it is, like, okay, we're married and we're trying to make our way through life, and we have our little day to day. But there's this sweetness of we're together, and unless you understand that and what that destroys, you don't get it.
You don't get it.
You don't get what there is.
Right.
Okay. So this is a universal exercise that everyone has to go through. It's you weigh it for yourself, you learn the opposites, and then you'll see. So he talks now about his pondering on the love for power from the love of self, which you might say, that's not that bad. So let's look at what's the characteristic of it? Why is it top that list? He says, as I considered the love for power that comes from loving ourselves, I was given an awareness that this is the most profoundly hellish love, and that it exists among those who are in the lowest hell. I could also see that a love for power that comes from loving to be useful is the most profoundly heavenly love, and that it exists among those who are in the highest heaven.
It's interesting because elsewhere he'll say that, I thought he was going to say something about, loving the Lord, loving your neighbor, those, but he's using different language here. specifically focusing on love of power, of these two opposite kinds.
What is it to if you love me, said Jesus, feed my sheep.
Yeah.
How do you express love without being able to do something that's good? He goes on, a love for power that comes from loving ourselves is profoundly hellish because of its origin. It arises from self-centeredness. From birth, the self is utterly evil. And what is utterly evil is the complete opposite of the Lord. Hang on.
Now that's going to be
come on. Leave me alone. Yeah. What are you talking about? The self is this self. I didn't come on this show to get lectured about what are we to make of that statement? And what do we mean? What does he mean by what's the self then in the first place?
Yeah, I think what he's talking about is that we all have this, what he would call an appearance of self-life. We wake up in the morning and we really think, it's up to me. Should I get up now? Should I stay in bed for a little longer? Should I look at my phone? Should I not look at my phone? What should I look at on my phone? And should I eat something? What should I eat? All those little decisions, we feel totally like we're a life form in our own right. And we have total freedom. We can do whatever we want, and we choose to do anything. But that doesn't understand the fact that we're actually a vessel and things flow in. So one of his big things that we talk about often on the show is the idea that actually your impulses, your desires, your thoughts, the plans that you have and all that flows in. And some of that comes from a good place and some of it comes from a bad place. And so there's something that allows the worst things that happen are things that happen because we didn't understand our vesselhood.
So within that vessel, is the Latin word proprium? So
yes.
It means what is our own.
What really belongs to you. Yeah, your own. It's very related to the word property, proprium. And
yes.
So it's like your own intellectual and emotional property.
And this is what's in a fallen state.
Yeah.
There's this concept in Christianity and elsewhere.
This has been bad for a while.
We've got a fallen state. And the claim that he makes is that generally our sense of self is driven behind the scenes by this total selfishness. Like it's mitigated by the things we learn and do, and a lot of our good impulses and things are kind of getting around that, but there's a part of us that absolutely wants these things, all the things that are in hell. This is why you see people, and we're going to read about some of it, but you see people just go off the deep end when they get power. And
absolutely, it's quite common. Yeah,
but also you see it in your own self all the time. It's like when you're arguing with somebody, when somebody doesn't do what you want them to do, when somebody insults you, or just your attitude towards generally your fellow human beings. That's all in there. And the whole process of what God is doing to us in our life is slowly weaning us off this egocentric life that we have and onto this love of being useful. That's what heaven is. The
mental image that I'm getting is that our self is like the little property that we live on. You know, a lot of people are just on a third of an acre or half an acre, whatever, maybe less than that, an apartment building or whatever. And so he's not talking about the fact that you can leave your house and go out to all these other magnificent buildings. He's not talking about the fact that there are all these other people around. He's just talking about the part. So you may live in the city or wherever you live, the countryside, and yes, you get to enjoy all that. It's just the part that you own. That's what the property, that's what the proprium means. It's the part that belongs to you. And what he's saying is the part that really, really belongs to you, that didn't come to you from somebody else or isn't something outside of your thing, is just this set of petty grievances and, lusts and we have an inclination to be self-centered. And from the moment we're born, the Lord offsets this. He's working to offset it. So as we talked about last time, the Lord's giving little children these angelic experiences and love for others and beautiful states of sweetness and all that. But you can also see in children that the monster will come out from time to time. You mentioned cookies before. Well, I've seen situations where one kid will have 18 cookies and another kid just wants one, and it's like, and you can see that it rises up out of them. That is your little territory. That's your selfhood.
Yeah,
it's not the only thing in you. I like you referring to it as a part, because I think that's a good way to think about it. But it's sort of the basement. It's the lowest part in you.
Why does everybody love someone who's self-effacing? There's no quality that more quickly gains respect from people. That if you're like these angel teachers were, Swedenborg goes to them.
Aren't they amazing?
He says, "What?"
Like you love them instantly because they just say, "I'm not sure."
Give me these things, and they say, "Well, look, I don't know that much about it." What is the model? Let's say, like, of somebody who's highly visible, like a CEO. If they think I did this all myself and I'm way better than these people, and they take the credit, nobody likes them for that. But if it's somebody
and these
who says,
other idiots would wreck the business if I didn't micromanage them every second. And
whether or not that's true, there's something in us that says, oh, this person who gives credit to other people, who says, look, this would be, they call it level 5 leaders.
Level 5 leaders.
I was reading this. It was a
humble leadership.
Good to great.
That's right.
And they did this whole study and said that the companies that actually, over a 15-year period, outperform the stock market, some huge percentage of the time are led by what they called level 5 leaders. A level 5 leader is somebody who is very self-effacing and has a small ego, and yet has intense ambition for the good of the company.
They're driven by the mission, not by do I feel good about myself right now?
This is just something they went out, and these people who had never heard of Swedenborg not hearing about the 3 universals of heaven and hell, they go out and they find that the way it works is if you can find somebody who is not wrapped up in their own ego and their own pride and their own desire for wealth, that's good, but it's also got to be someone who at the same time has this strong ambition for the good of the company.
Yes.
Then that's what works the best.
Really cares about that.
Just
and
so
people
happens,
love to work for people like that. Like it's just a.
I'm just saying
it's a pleasure because you get recognized and seen because they're not all about. I mean the opposite again by comparing them. There are leaders in this world, and you can see this in yourself. So where you want to, no matter what somebody else did, you take, if it was good, you take credit for it. If it was bad, you blame them.
Or if you did something that I think is a good idea and I wanted to try to do, and it's the same thing that happened, but you did it instead of me, I don't like this. They shouldn't have done that.
No, that's right, because I didn't come up with the idea myself, and that's a threat to me.
I'm just trying to say, people at home are probably saying, what are you talking about? The self is evil. That's horrible. Masochistic Christian.
What a dark.
We're all sinners.
View of what we.
That's terrible.
Aren't we all? Don't we have a spark of God? Aren't we beautiful children of God?
You're supposed to love yourself. That's the path to. I'm saying there's something to it because it's all spiritual traditions have something. Buddhism is like you're trying to get past your attachments.
That's right.
Aren't you? Which is another, or Maya, which is another way of saying the stuff that, all the meditation is like, stop getting wrapped up in your stuff. The next time you have one of your little ego-fueled thoughts is coming across your mind, you just let that sucker walk across the field and don't get wrapped up in it. Because you know what? Why would you do that? It's your own mind. No, because that thing is nothing but trouble. That thing is nothing but trouble.
Yeah.
That is... Yeah, there's something in there. You can argue, if you don't like calling it yourself, you can call it your proprium, but there's something in there that will If you let it drive, it will destroy you and would destroy everyone if it could. And he's saying,
and it's a natural kind of, I don't even want to call it fallout, but it's just it's the thing that you risk by God's creating all these vessels and endowing them with life and all these blessings. The one big risk is that they're going to think that they independently exist, and there will be this little monster in there.
Well, it's even
because they'll feel like they're gods, and they're going to want to lord it over other people, even though all that's happening is that the Lord is trying to bless us with life, bless us with His life and creativity and all those beautiful things.
And even the idea of independence is not, in the end, the final culprit. What it does is it's the enabler, where the desire to harm and dominate and seek revenge, once the independent mind, once you don't really believe that other people are people and that you're the center of the universe, which is sort of what this independence thing is, it makes way for all this stuff. And Swedenborg talks about it here. He says, as a result, the further people progress into that evil love for power, the more they deny God and the holy teachings of the church, and instead worship themselves and the material world. If you are involved in this evil, I urge you to examine it in yourself.
This is Swedenborg saying this, and he doesn't often talk straight to the reader.
Yeah,
that's very
I
interesting.
urge you to examine it in yourself. You will see what I mean. Which challenge accepted. So I don't walk around. It's funny because what I want to communicate to people is I had plenty of self-esteem struggles throughout my life, and I always wanted to feel like better about myself and think I was greater and everything.
Yeah.
That doesn't really pan out like you think it will, and it's not really your friend like you think it is. I found that's part of the misery industrial complex, is this lingering on, well, how great am I? You don't get, God wants to make you feel great about yourself, but doesn't do it through this constant focus on yourself and how do I compare to people and everything. And to be able to say, oh, that part is no good, is super powerful and super liberating. And you got to understand, like, once you get a leg up, you just start despising people and you start being willing to cross boundaries, and you're looking for the next thing that's going to make you feel good. It's a dangerous state to be in.
From his research with his clipboard walking around hell, he could see that this is where all kinds of evils come from that. It might not sound so bad, like what does it matter what I just think in my own head? But ultimately that leads to a cruelty, dismissiveness of other people, even savagery, brutality, all kinds of horrible evils come out of this thing that we're talking about.
Well, here he describes further what happens when that stuff gets off the leash. Because right now, in most people, it's kind of leashed because of the fear of penalties and things.
Yeah, there's laws and everything.
It is also in the nature of this love that the more the reins on it are let out, which happens when impossibilities no longer block the way, the more it rushes on, one step after another, all the way to the top. It does not end there either. If there is no higher step up, it groans with pain. So here's an example. In politicians, this kind of love rises to the point where they want to be monarchs and emperors. If they could, they would rule over all parts of the world and would be called kings of kings and emperors of emperors. The same kind of love in the clergy rises to the point where they want to be gods. If they could, they would rule over all parts of heaven and would be called gods.
Yeah. And as you say, most people don't walk around thinking, yeah, that is kind of my 5-year strategic plan.
Get up there, do that.
But he often uses, very, very often uses this analogy of the reins.
Yeah.
So, those leather thongs with a horse and all that. And when you pull back on the reins, the horse slows down. And when you let out the reins, run as fast as you want to run. And so it implies that we're supposed to be reining that in. Those drives like, hey, not so fast. Because this thing wants to charge in that direction.
Well, the examples that he gives, politicians, clergy. If you go
why would he single those people out?
Just go study history for a while and read about some of the kinds of people who've gotten to be in charge of countries and armies and things. And go just like learn about
it's amazing.
The things that they have done, things that people are doing today. And nobody can deny there's something really dark in the human heart.
Yeah.
So I think anybody watching would say, "Oh yeah, well some of those people they go crazy." I heard this podcast or something, I don't know where it was, but it was talking about it was an audiobook about, man, there's so many things that flow into your consciousness now. It's just like, was I reading a book? Was I watching a video? So it's gotta be true, hopefully. But this was, I think it was from a book. I remember this story very vividly, where it was a book about the nature of power. And what kind of people seek power, what kind of characteristics and qualities are there of people who get in that position? Does power, one of the central questions was, does power corrupt, or are people already corrupt that get into there? And it had a whole section on homeowners associations. And that there was this particular homeowners association that nobody really wants the job of president of the homeowners association.
Right.
If anyone is out there watching, I'm sure you're one of the good ones, but nobody really wants the job. So the kind of people who end up in there, at times, it's just the people who see, I can be in control and I want to be in control. And it was this whole thing. There's one particular example of this person who was in charge of it and just waging these personal wars on whoever they didn't like and using it for that. So it's not even that. It's not even that if you get up to the highest level that then you exercise it. It comes out there. There's even that famous experiment.
And any sort of authority or power, just a slight power over the person next door, and you feel like, okay, I'm going to get rid of that stuff on their lawn. They are not.
What about that? There's that other famous experiment where they had some students playing a Monopoly type game, and they gave one set of the students more money to start with, so they started out rich and powerful, and there was always little tells in their behavior. Those people took more of the free pretzels that were on the table, were more likely to cheat. There's just this, right away, there's this, it happens. It gets let out whenever you get into a position of power or wealth or authority, that's ready to come out. So I'm just saying there's something that we're keeping in check. All the laws, I'm just imagining people like, how dare you accuse me of being evil? And I'm trying to say, there's something in the self. Why are there laws? Why is there, you're not allowed to murder people? Nobody's going to murder.
There are circumstances where
if people get in the right circumstances, they will say, and a lot of, like, if you look at the gang killings and things, it's because you insulted me or you stepped onto my turf.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And so
you disrespected me, and right, something's got to be done about that.
That's just love of self-operating. And people who have more to lose, who are like richer, they'll do it in other ways. I mean, sometimes they just kill each other, but there's other times I'll ruin you financially. Like, don't you know who I am? It's there.
When I first heard read Swedenborg saying things like this, I just thought, there are a few people who are in power. Doesn't this only apply to a few people at the top of the heap? But then you realize, well, no, there's leadership of one kind or another at every level. As you say, you got a little book club, you've got a 12-step meeting, you've got, at every level, there's leadership. And so society is full of leadership positions, and how leadership works is a thing that Swedenborg was very interested in, and said there's a big heaven and hell that's possible here.
The third characteristic of heaven, which is true married love. We did a show on that not so long ago where we said, do you know what is the thing that most completely destroys true married love? Is dominance.
Look at that.
So even with it's just you and your partner, if you are given into that
that's right.
love of ruling from the love of self.
It's not even the whole book club. It's just in your own house.
Meaning it's not like, oh, one of you does the finances and the other one of you does the whatever because you're both good at those things. But you're just like, I am going to boss you around because I want to boss you around or because you're not doing what I want. That's the same thing. It's the same hell. And Swedenborg would say two people who are together in that arrangement, even if they're married, and there's no married love. There's nothing of marriage in there. Yeah. Because it's hell instead of heaven.
And here again, although various laws sort of keep a lid on society, we've all heard the stories of usually almost always a guy locks the woman in the basement, like such control that I'm going to physically lock you up and make it impossible for you to even leave the house. Other people won't even know you're down there, kind of thing. And then it turns out that somebody's been down there in this miserable situation for years, and that love is in there. That's in us. So we may not see it because it may just manifest in a certain sort of like, I don't want you, no, and we think, well, that's fine. I mean, a spouse should be able to say that to another spouse or something. Right. But it's the thin edge of a wedge that goes to a very dark place.
You can't tell. You often can't tell because you love your love of self. And so you think like the ego feels justified winning that argument, setting these boundaries because you can't tell hell from your perspective. You might think we're doing fine here, we're doing great. You're making it hell for the other person, and you don't even know because you're not examining it. So universal characteristics, heaven and hell. Hey, I've got an announcement. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you are, you can become a member. There is a little join button that is below each video and on the channel homepage. You click that and you can sign up to be a member of Off the Left Eye. If you do that, we are going to give you custom emojis that you can use when we're premiering a show or when you comment on this channel. You get custom badges that show how long you've been a fan of this channel, so you can say to your friends, you haven't been a member as long as I have, and that will feel good. And you get behind the scenes photos and members only posts as a way for us to say thank you to you. So it's a fun way to support the channel and make what we do possible. So click that button, join, become a member today. Okay, back to the show. And then the other category of abuse of power he gives is religious leaders.
Isn't that interesting? That church and state, so you've got them both in there.
And when he talks about how it's different in the clergy, that they want to be themselves gods, often he'll harangue the Catholic Church of his day. And he will say, look, you guys set it up so that you control who goes to heaven or to hell. The excommunication versus we literally, you can buy your way into heaven or hell through us.
Forgiveness, going to a priest and getting absolved,
or the desire to dominate every aspect of the people's lives. You rule through it. I don't think you have to look too hard at history as well to see, that's fertile ground for the same thing.
And even though in a lot of countries in the world now, there's more of a separation of church and state, and the whole relationship has changed, it's still very easy to see religious figures who are just amassing enormous amounts of wealth and parade around like kings and queens or what, you know what I mean? You can see that these things, the church is sadly not exempt from those drives, because you get that power over people. It feels fantastic, feels
I think
great.
Swedenborg's great critique of the Christian church as a whole in his day, Protestant, Catholic, everywhere, was that it doesn't even know what heaven is and what hell is.
Right.
It doesn't understand that hell is these three loves of evil and heaven is the three opposite loves of what's good. So you have people who've got Christianity in their mouth, in their brand, but are engaging in the things that are against the Ten Commandments and the teachings of Jesus that are you're doing the hell thing.
I love his analysis because it reminds me of the point that he makes about cities, that he says specifically of London in England, that there's a good London and a bad London in the spiritual world, which is so interesting. I think he says the same about Jerusalem and some other cities, and that really got me thinking, because I realized that people may think, I'm sure there are a lot of people who think, you know what the worst thing is in the world? Christianity. You know, I heard somebody recently making a joke about the rapture. So, you know, you go forward a couple of hundred years, and they said the world is so much better. You know, it's so much better. And somebody said, "Oh, why was that?" They said, "All the Christians got raptured." You know, that made everything so much better. Now it's peaceful, and you know, that same judgment and all that stuff is not there. But what he would say is there's good Christianity and bad Christianity. There's good politics. There's bad politics.
That's right.
You know, everything has a good and bad version. We've lost our ability to discern heaven from hell, and you slice it a different way than just that's, you know, or the United States is bad, or this country's bad, or you know, no, it's not that simple. There's heavenly and hellish versions all over the place.
We got our discernment back because all you got to do is check these 3 universal characteristics. Is it love of dominion for love of self? Is it love of the world for love of self? Is it licentious love? That's hell.
Yeah.
Is it love of power for the love of usefulness?
Yeah.
Or is it wealth for the love of usefulness?
Yeah.
Is it marriage love? Then that's heaven. There we go. We got it back.
We got it back.
So then what's it like if you don't adopt the universal characteristics of hell and you do the universal characteristics of heaven instead? On the other hand, people who want to be in charge because they love being useful actually want the Lord rather than themselves to be in charge.
No.
Since the love of being useful comes from the Lord and is in fact the Lord himself. People of this type regard high positions as nothing more than means of being useful. They value being useful far more than they value the positions themselves. The people we discussed a moment ago value high positions far more than they value being useful. So the heaven is...
So just having the title. That's what I want, the title. I don't want the responsibility. You know, I don't want to actually try to clean up the world or something.
Same in anything. You want the title of parent. What is it? Because I want to have kids that I want to be cool, because like, look at me, I had some kids, and I want them to do really well so that it reflects well on me, and I want them to get wealthy so that I can retire. You know,
take care of me in my old age. Right.
Obviously, that's the polar opposite of I am going to do whatever I can to make it so that this person who's been entrusted into my care by God has every opportunity to the best of my ability to go and have a great shot at life.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
And I'd like to minimize the
opposite
impact of my own quirkiness.
It happens
or
anyway.
Fallen nature on this poor soul who's born into my household.
Enough talking about hell. Let's hear about hell from somebody who is in hell. What's it like if you dive
reporter on the ground
all the way in to those loves that we talked about? Where do they lead?
What does it look like? So because even with the examples we have in this world, there's still sort of restraints and checks and balances. But what's the full thing look like?
This is Swedenborg's encounter with a devil or with a demon. By the scientist Emanuel Swedenborg in the 1700s. Continuing in the book True Christianity. As I was meditating on these things, an angel said to me, on behalf of the Lord, in a moment you will see and be visually convinced of the hellish nature of that love. Meaning the love of ruling from the love of selfishness.
So this was part of the same meditation, right?
That's it.
He's thinking about it, and then an angel comes and says, we're going to have a visual for, I'm just warning you. It's kind of cool. Yeah. It's sort of like the person with the headset who comes through and say, you know.
So first he goes and asks, get an answer, then go think about this for yourself and see what you think. And now we're just going to show you an example, see if that rounds out your conception. So here's the example. Then suddenly the ground to the left opened up, and I saw a devil rising up from hell. He had a square hat on his head, that was pressed down over his forehead to his eyes. His face was covered with a pustular rash, as if he had a high fever. His eyes were fierce. His chest protruded misshapenly. He was belching smoke from his mouth as if he were a furnace. His groin was visibly on fire. Where his feet should have been, he had just ankles with bones but no flesh. His body gave off a rotten, filthy heat.
That's quite a description. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't see much of that on the streets.
He doesn't go into it here, but all of those details would be correspondences.
Absolutely.
So the reason why this devil, which according to Swedenborg, this is a person who used to live in the world, in Europe maybe somewhere, wherever, and they got so into these three loves during their life, they fell in love with those loves and are now, that's the central joy of their life. That's what it does to your form because of the nature of it. Okay, when I saw him, I was terrified and shouted to him, "Stay where you are, but tell me, where are you from? Don't get near me."
Don't get near me, but I still am interested. I'm curious. I'm terrified, but curious.
So what does somebody who's in hell, if they get a chance to have their say, what do they say? "I am from below," he answered in a rasping voice. "I live there in a community of 200 people. It is the single most important community of all. All of us there are emperors of emperors, kings of kings, dukes of dukes, and princes of princes. No one there is just an ordinary emperor, king, duke, or prince. We sit there on thrones above thrones and issue commands to the entire universe and beyond."
You see that sort of title creep that happens in organizations who we can't have any mere. Used to be the biggest thing you could be in the world was emperor, but now it's like, no, that's small.
You have to hang out with these emperors.
Right.
"Are you aware," I asked him, "that your fantasy about ruling the world has made you insane?"
Interesting question. Yeah.
So I would think Swedenborg obviously does not believe this guy actually does issue commands from down there for the whole universe and beyond.
Seems unlikely.
So he's
been in that world for quite a long time, and like this guy he didn't have to get permission from this guy to do what he was doing.
So he's asking, do you know what that sounds? How that sounds coming out of your mouth?
That sounds a little nuts.
The demon's reply is, "How can you say such a thing?" He replied, "This is exactly who we see we are, and our colleagues acknowledge it too."
Yeah. Okay, so in this group of 200, there's mutual agreement that this is it. We all know.
Yeah.
We all know. And don't human societies and groups do that where we all know? I mean, we all know that ours is the best. We know, right?
Yeah, you guys did great, but
no.
When I heard that, I no longer wanted to tell him, "You are insane," because his fantasy actually had driven him insane. So initially, Swedenborg's how much is this guy here? How much can I reason with him?
Yeah.
And when he realizes, he's crazy, he doesn't want to poke him then. He's not, there's no use in it.
There's no
anymore.
point.
He's not trying to just make fun of him. He's saying, I actually can't reason with you.
Yeah.
Then I was given the knowledge that back when this devil was alive in the world, he was only a caretaker in someone's house. But he had come into such pride in his spirit that he despised the entire human race in comparison with himself.
And I find that that's sometimes the case, like when I've been to international conferences or things like that, I'll hear somebody get up on the microphone and they have so much pride and they're just oozing all this. And it turns out they're way down in the pecking order. And then the people who are the most amazing scholars are just sweet and they have a twinkle in their eye and they're asking everybody how they're doing and they don't have this enormous sense of themselves. So it's interesting. This is just a caretaker. He's not even the main, he's not even the owner. He's just a caretaker of some estate somewhere or something.
So what he did with it was despise the entire human race in comparison with himself. He had also indulged,
which is fun. I mean, I get it. I've felt that. Yeah.
It's easy to do. There's a gravity toward it.
Yeah.
But that's not fair.
No.
Because the rest of the human race, you wouldn't want someone to despise you, and there's just no way that that you happen to be, you are the one.
You're the,
I think,
pinnacle of creation.
The more that you get exposed to people, the more you realize, oh, they're kind of like me.
Yeah. And there's something wonderful about, honestly, at a very much earlier phase of my life, I realized there were like 7 or 8 people who were on a pedestal in comparison with whom I felt absolutely worthless and nothing. But then I also saw myself as superior to basically the rest of the human
regular
race or
people.
something, you know. And that was such a sickness. And I actually prayed to get over that. And it's been such a blessing that I now have a nice feeling of just being one of the gang, part of the, you know, we're all crushingly ordinary, you know.
This is what I'm telling you. Having an inflated sense of self is isolating.
Yeah.
And it makes you unhappy because you never get the respect you feel like you deserve. And you feel conflicted about, like, wait a second, really? There's like me and a few other people in the world. We're the emperors of emperors, and everybody else is miserable.
Everybody.
Whereas
there's a lot of people.
If you took the wisest angels in heaven who actually really are doing great, and you took them into a room of anybody, they would be fascinated by each individual person. They'd be looking for, where's the goodness of the Lord in you? How and what can I would give anything that I have, even my position in heaven, to you if it would help you.
If it would help you.
Swedenborg says elsewhere that any angel in heaven would gladly trade with any devil in hell, with this guy, anyone who's down in hell, if the people in hell would do it.
And if anybody had a right to walk around and be the boss, don't you know who I am? That was Jesus. Jesus actually had the goods. You know, he was divine, miraculous power, and you see him just picking up these sweethearts. Oh, you got a busted leg. Oh, here's a little child. And he's absolutely beautiful. He's compassionate. And you never get the sense of, like, you know, superiority. Like, you are so beneath me. You know, you never get that feeling.
Beyond when he went into the temple and turned over the money changers' tables, which is, again, this, like, the religious hubris that he'll go after that. Beyond that, I'm trying to think of the biggest power flex he ever did, given his position. And I think it's this.
He cursed a fig tree.
Well, what about this? One time he said, I need to borrow that donkey.
That's true. He did, and the master has need of it. That's right.
But if you actually are the God of the universe, that's what you do. That's your big thing. It's like, can I borrow that?
I need that.
I need to borrow that
on a temporary basis. I'll return it to you.
I need to borrow that donkey.
Right.
But as for everything else, born in a little stable,
and the upper room and all that. Yeah.
Born in a little stable outside of any major city. It couldn't even get in the inn, so it was born out in the stable. At one point, he's trying to do his sermon, and a bunch of little kids run up to him, and the disciples are like, "Come on, you can't.
Stop it!
Do you have ID?"
And
he's like, "No, let them come to me."
And he changes the whole message around what about the kids.
He's like, "I'll work with that. That's great."
Yeah,
people come to him in the garden and are going to arrest him to kill him, and one of his disciples cuts their ear off, and he's like, don't do that. Heals the ear of the guy. He lets people torture him and kill him.
Yeah.
And doesn't even take revenge on him.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
That ain't how it works.
Yeah.
And he was
he could have done it.
Well,
if that was the way you were supposed to do, then he would have shown us all by just one flex after another.
It is useful.
Just dominating and crushing. It is useful
having the divine human story of the divine human.
I know. It's so useful.
He had also indulged, going back to the state of, like, what led this guy in his life to end up or to be in this stage later on. He had also indulged in the fantasy that he was more than a king and even more than an emperor.
Indulged in fantasy. We did I was very interested in our show a while ago about obsessive thoughts.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sure we talked about that.
That was amazing. And this guy indulged in and it doesn't sound like he did it on one Saturday night. Like he regularly thought about, oh man, I can picture it. Yeah, like I would have my robes, the purple and the ermine and the,
I already am that. They just don't know it. That pride had led him to deny God and to consider all the holy teachings of the church as worthless for him, although he did think they had some value for the stupid masses. They are the opiate of the masses.
Isn't that another thing that you feel like that's good for all that?
We need to keep those idiots under control.
But that's not. I'm above that. I don't need that.
Eventually, I asked him, the 200 of you there, how long are you going to keep up this boasting to each other?
He sort of puts his finger on.
Yeah.
Like, the guy didn't refer to it as boasting.
Yeah.
He said, you're just boasting to each other, which is so sad in a way. A group say, I'm really something too.
Forever, he said. Although those among us who torture anyone for denying their utter superiority do sink down, we are allowed to boast, but not to harm anyone.
So the rules.
No, this is, I think, this tells you what you need to know about what hell is. People think that hell is a place of torment. So if God had never designed it, everyone would be living a much happier afterlife because you wouldn't be in hell. You'd just get to get away with things. But what hell actually is, for people who have willingly gotten into and loved and supported and lived one of these ultra-destructive loves, like this love of dominion, where what he wants to do is rule over everyone. Would you want this guy to rule over your life? That's what he wants to do. And not only that, it was kind of seeming silly to a minute there when you realize it's got teeth. He's saying that what we're not allowed to do is torture anyone if they don't agree with us. But they would.
But they wanted. They'd like to.
But in this hell, which is this community,
it would seem fit, like that. You should be able to.
That's what
that's what they deserve.
And some of them do it. So it's not like, oh, this guy's just a friendly, harmless guy. If you don't agree with me, I'm going to torture you. What God has done here is I'm going to create a space where obviously you can't rule the universe, and you have these insane homicidal tendencies that probably you don't even understand the depths of. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you together with other people who are like you, and you guys can kind of play this game where you can kind of think you're living out your fantasies. However, what I'm not going to let you do is actually torture people. As soon as you do that, you got to leave that, because that hell's protecting them from each other as well. So as soon as you do that, you got to go somewhere else where maybe there's more stringent conrols or something. But that's the nature of hell.
And I don't know whether that's temporary or not, but from other passages, I think it is.
Yeah.
That after a while. So really, the Lord is saying, you can knock yourself out. I understand this is what you love. As long as you're not hurting people, I will let this continue. And I'll even call you up to instruct Swedenborg, because it's useful. Because you are an embodiment of something, and people need to be able to see this. So I'll bring you up and use you for this purpose. So as opposed to God just delighting in the screams of the burning devils or something, the Lord is actually very kind to these people and understanding. But you're not allowed to torture people. Yep. You go right down through the trapdoor when that happens.
And it tells you what happens to the people that go down the trapdoor. Do you know, I asked him, what happens to the people who sink down? They sink into a kind of prison, he said. And what happens to you in this prison? Where they are called the lowest of the low.
Now that hurts.
Like, okay. And
when the love that you have is like, I rule the universe, calling me the lowest of the low, that's hard.
And they have to do work.
No. Now that's an insult.
So it finishes with Swedenborg saying, take care that you yourself do not sink down, I told him. If you uncovered, like going inside the worst prison in the world, there's some corrupt regime, and what did they do? How did they break the Geneva Convention, whatever. If you found out that like the punishment, even in hell, for these people who would torture each other at a moment, the punishment is we deflate your ego, Like you're called the lowest of the low, and you got to do something useful with your life. We gave you the chance. You can sit in that room if you want, or wherever they are. It's not a room. It's some kind of community. You can boast and do all this stuff, and then you can't help yourself. So you decide I'm gonna torment this person because they didn't agree with me. What you have to do is you're not allowed to call yourself the highest of the high anymore, and you got to do some work.
Yeah,
because
humility and work, they're civilizing forces, right?
Which is the same situation the angels were in voluntarily up in heaven. When Swedenborg goes to them in the beginning and he says, what do you know about this? And they say, well, we know next to nothing about this.
Isn't that right?
We're the lowest of the low, and they're sitting there doing their job. They're doing work.
Yeah.
So you can do it because you love to be useful. Ultimately, you gotta be in that state. There's two paths to get there. And
what a fun thing for them to have a Swedenborg come along. They don't necessarily know who he is or whatever, but he comes along, and then he asks them this awesome question. They probably love that's a great question. Yeah. That's a great question. And I'll tell you what, I have no idea, but I can pray, and then seemingly seconds later, in the same story, they've got all this insight, which they will be able to keep. Like they understand something they didn't understand before, because they love being used. They're helping Swedenborg's understanding. He's going to write it all down and publish it so that people in this planet can learn about those things. So let's just think about what's the utility of this knowledge. Let's say that, I think I could see those as being the three universals of heaven and the three universals of hell. What does that do? Why do we need to know this? I think the first application of any spiritual knowledge that has to do with heaven and hell is you need to turn it inward and try to discern in yourself where are the heavenly things in myself and where are the hellish things in myself, and how do I emphasize and feed and support the heavenly things and de-emphasize and wean myself off of, over whatever time I need, the hellish things. Yeah. Right? Yeah. There's a fun stage that you left out there, which comes first, which is to see these things in other people, as we talked about. So you get these ideas in your mind. You can't see it in yourself yet. Yeah. But when you look out across the world, it's so transparent. When the HOA person is such a nightmare or something, okay, I see that quality. I see how that makes me feel. I see how that makes all these other people feel. And I see that financially. I see that with people's sexual behavior. And so you see it out there. That's more fun. Then there's the hard part, which is the part you described, where you turn inward and do your repentance and self-examination, looking to see, okay, I don't think I do that, but do I do that, Lord? You ask for a little light to come in and look at your own behavior. Yes, ask people who know you. No, honey, you never do anything like that. Yeah, you're doing fine. You're okay. And you can see it. And once you really, it's almost like a whiff, it's almost like a stench that you start to become familiar with. It has that reek of like, yep, that's that thing. This just seems like a minor thing, or it even seems like fun to me. Like I think I've talked before about in earlier, manifestation of myself, enjoying mockery, loving making fun of people and stuff like that. Like it feels great, it feels like, oh, that's hilarious, and people laugh and everything like that. But seeing, I'm kind of slaughtering those people, like I'm superior and I'm kind of slaughtering them, and I'm using my mind to try to think of things that will put them down. It keeps you in a tier where it's like, oh yeah, I'm in the tier of people that would kind of make fun of. They're in the tier of the kind of people who would get made fun of. And I even feel that when I know that everybody on YouTube gets negative comments, but I was like, nobody would ever.
Like, as soon as somebody sees me on here, they're going to be like, never mind, that guy's awesome.
He's cool.
Yeah. But so then when they do, say, I'm like, what? There must be some mistake here. You're talking about me? I'm cool. I'm great. What are you even talking? No, I can see why you might make fun of them.
Sure.
You didn't fall for me as soon as you saw me. Don't you know who I am? I'm the emperor of emperors, man. I'm like, this is great. And you're right. The phase of going and looking out in the world is important because that's how you start to understand what they are. It's just like this was what happened with Swedenborg here, is he went and got to see them in hell and understand.
Yes, didn't he? That's
but it's
right.
not, there's not really that much you can ever do with going and seeing them out in the world, because you're only ever seeing an approximation of them, because you don't really know with anybody if they're actually working on evil or good motives.
What's going on inside? No, and Swedenborg's very adamant about the point that we cannot judge other people spiritually. Like, we don't even know. The people we may think are the worst are, they have some reason, or their intent is not as evil. They're deluded, or they are right about something that you think they're wrong about. Yeah. Or that what they're doing is actually the result of some spiritual work in them, and it's actually coming from a humble place.
Yep.
Or something, but it looks to you like, monster.
So it's good and fine to go do that. It teaches you about it. I don't think, even if you have these universal principles of what heaven is and what hell is, that you would be able to go out and make a bunch of better laws for people than we have right now. Generally, I don't think. But where this actually can be really potent is in looking at yourself, in looking inside yourself. Because if you can, everyone has the only clear view anyone has, or relatively clear view, is to start to look at yourself. And I think how Swedenborg describes it is, if you're open to the idea, if you're open to having things from hell identified in you, and you ask the power greater than yourself to shine a light on that, so you willingly went into it, like you'll see them. You'll see them. And then on the flip side, you notice when you're loving something because it's useful. Yeah. And you notice when that flows in. When you're helping. Right. And notice when you want to be a good husband or wife. Oh, you can build on that. You can trust that. You can try to build it up, Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And the process of repentance on these things, although it can certainly be painful, you also realize through the process that the Lord is loving, He's merciful, He knew all about it, He's the one who showed you, and that's okay. I can use you, but He can use us more if we're aware of that darkness, and just have it on a leash. It's not like or that horse image, you don't have to kill the horse. Just keep a hold of those reins. Don't let the horse do everything it wants to do. That's how you get to be that guy with the bulging chest and the no feet.
And it's like it takes a long time, and it's hard to do. Our mind can get there way faster than our will can. So we can, this morning I was at a cafe picking up breakfast before this, and there was somebody there who had seen me talking about in another program, like, you're not supposed to worry, and like the importance of how God in the Bible is always saying, don't worry. And Swedenborg talks about the stream of providence and how you're supposed to be that and stuff. And she was saying that something that I said in there was really helpful. And she's like, I've been working on that. And I thought to myself, I hope she doesn't think that I'm really good at that just because I talked about it.
Right. Oh, man.
Like, I'm trying a little.
If you could read my anxiety meters.
But I was like, that's a lot of pressure. But, your mind gets there way before your will does, or before your life. And that's how it has to be. The intellect is what allows you to, the observer allows you to shine a light on yourself. And it's fine to be lagging way behind that in your will, but you can make progress that way. So it's like, set goals, but it doesn't mean you can run a marathon today.
No. And there's a general trajectory to your life. There was a trajectory to this person's life. And when Swedenborg realized he was completely out of his mind, he no longer bothers to try to But I think he actually had this desire to help the person,
Yeah.
by kind of challenging him a little bit, or so you realize you're insane, or you.
Yeah. And then he
but
says,
then when he realized, no, okay, he's too far gone.
be careful not to sink down. So don't make yourself worse. Don't commit more evil. Don't get deeper enmeshed into the loves of hell.
And even in that idea of the place of punishment, down beneath it is the idea that you can still help these people not be torturers, even though they would love to be. But for people still alive in this world, we got time we can bend our path, we can head in a different direction, and it's a long game.
Dude.
It's a gradual process.
Dude, I think I know how we can close this up here. So the traditional concept of hell, which is a place of revenge torment, where you disobeyed God, and so he torments you. That would be the ultimate expression of ruling from a love of self on God's behalf. Because torture, just like I hate you, so I'm going to make you suffer, that's what that love is. It's not because I'm trying to do anything, it's just revenge. It's pure revenge. So to think that even that guy who's got the square hat on as a devil from hell, when he gets sent down into whatever prison type situation he's got to go in there, even in that thing, the intent is not to make him suffer.
No.
The intent is to get him doing better things and to protect other people. So even there,
Yes.
the God is right down in that space.
Yep.
And whatever work needs to be done, even if there's like, we're going to be called lowest to the low because we got to diffuse your ego a little bit. That is still for the sake, there's still no love of ruling for the sake of self from God there. It's always, how can I make it so your life doesn't get worse? How can I make you do something a little better?
Yeah.
If you do this work here for a while, that's going to maybe free up your mind so you don't try to torture people. Like, that's the spirit that follows everywhere, because those qualities, the love of ruling to be useful, the love of material resources to be useful, marriage love, which is just faithfulness. You know where those come from? You know who is the ultimate example of those? It's God.
Yeah.
That's what he's like. He doesn't want to rule anyone. He just wants to make people happy. That's the intent of the universe. So,
And some people think that God is that arbitrary, awful person. There's some beliefs that have reinforced that, or some reading of certain scriptures and so on. But I really don't think this world would. I know this world is tough. I know it's got a lot of painful experiences in it and everything. But if you really look at it, do you think that guy's in charge, the guy that we just read about? The guy who wants to torture everybody who doesn't sort of worship his majesty? Our lives would be very different. There's a benevolent force at the center of the universe that esteems us, that carries us through difficult times, and actually helps us get better as a result of them.
We kind of laugh at the predicament of that, or not the predicament, but the state of that guy. Because it's like, of course you're not the emperor of all emperors. You don't rule everything. And of course you can't, to torture someone just because they don't agree with you or they don't pay you the respect you deserve, that's a terrible thing to do. The concept of God as the hell torturer is the same guy.
Yeah.
You're just saying that God, notice the recoil in yourself at that person. You're saying God is just like that on a big scale. That you didn't pay me the respect I deserve when you're alive, so there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not how it is.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Man, thanks for taking the journey here. Thanks all of you for staying with us this long. You're our heroes. And we'll talk to you more in the next one. That's a good way to close. Thanks, everyone.